A police officer finds two 3-year-old twin girls shivering in the cold at the supermarket parking lot. One of them says, "My stepmother doesn't want us anymore." He never expected to be shocked upon discovering that the billionaire stepmother was his ex-girlfriend. Night had fallen with an unusual chill in Oakwood Hills, a refined suburb known for its imposing mansions and tree-lined streets. Officer Jack Harris, a 35-year-old man with sharp eyes and broad shoulders, was driving his patrol car slowly through the deserted parking lot of the local grocery store. His night shifts were usually quiet, but something in the air made his veteran instincts tingle with caution. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of empty vehicles and elongated shadows. Jack was about to turn around when a subtle movement caught his attention. He frowned, leaning over the steering wheel for a better view. There, between two luxury cars, were two small figures huddled together. Jack's heart raced. Children, at this time of night. He parked the patrol car and got out quickly, the icy air stinging his face. As he approached, the scene became clearer and more distressing. They were two little girls, identical down to the last strand of blonde hair, and they couldn't be more than 3 years old. They were hugging each other, trembling violently, their small bodies barely covered by thin pajamas. "Hello," Jack called gently, crouching down to their eye level. "It's all right. I'm a police officer. Can I help you?" The girls looked at him with wide and frightened eyes. One of them, who seemed slightly braver, spoke in a trembling voice that broke Jack's heart. "Our stepmother doesn't want us anymore." The phrase hung in the cold air, carrying a weight no child should ever bear. Jack felt a surge of anger and compassion welling up inside him. Who could abandon two little children on a night like this? "You must be freezing," Jack said, removing his heavy uniform jacket. He gently wrapped it around them, noticing how they immediately nestled into its warmth. "Let's get into the patrol car where it's warmer, okay? And maybe we can find something tasty for you to eat." The girls nodded timidly, letting Jack guide them to the car. He turned the heater up full blast, watching as the girls' cheeks slowly regained some color. "My name is Jack," he said, offering a reassuring smile. "Can you tell me your names?" "I'm Emily," said the girl who had spoken before. "And I'm Sarah," the other one whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Jack nodded, keeping his expression calm despite the flood of worries in his mind. "Emily and Sarah, those are beautiful names. Listen, I saw there's a convenience store on the corner. How about we go get some hot chocolate for you?" The girl's eyes lit up slightly at the mention of chocolate, and Jack felt a tightness in his chest. How often did these kids get to enjoy small pleasures like that? Minutes later, they were back in the patrol car, the girls carefully blowing on their steaming drinks. Jack took the moment to quickly contact dispatch. "Dispatch, this is Unit 27. I have two minors in my custody, found alone in the parking lot on Elm Street. Twin girls, approximately 3 years old, named Emily and Sarah. Requesting information on the family and guidance on how to proceed." The response came almost immediately, and the dispatcher's surprise was evident in their voice. "Unit 27, please confirm the minor's last name." Jack gently asked the girls, who answered in unison, "Blackwood." When Jack relayed the information, there was a tense silence before dispatch replied, "Unit 27, the minors in question are the daughters of Robert Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Tech, billionaire family, residents at Blackwood Mansion, 1250 Hillcrest Avenue. Upper authorities are being notified." Jack felt his stomach churn. The Blackwoods were practically royalty in Oakwood Hills. Their tech company was one of the biggest in the country, and their charity events were legendary. How on earth had the children of a billionaire ended up abandoned in a freezing parking lot? Thanking dispatch, Jack switched off the radio and turned to the girls, who now looked a bit more relaxed, their tiny fingers wrapped around the cups of hot chocolate. "Emily, Sarah," he began softly, "can you tell me how you got to the parking lot?" The girls exchanged looks, a silent communication only twins seemed capable of. Emily was the one who spoke. "Jenny brought us. She said it was an adventure. Jack frowned. Jenny, who's Jenny? Our stepmother, Sarah mumbled, her eyes fixed on the cup. Daddy calls her Jennifer. Jack's mind raced. Jennifer Blackwood, the stepmother. He vaguely remembered seeing her picture in local magazines, always smiling beside her husband at gala events. And why did Jenny bring you here? Jack asked, keeping his voice calm despite the growing feeling that something was very, very wrong. Emily shrugged, a surprisingly grown-up gesture for such a small child. She said we had to wait, that it was a hide-and-seek game. Sarah added in a low voice, but it's been a long time, and it's cold. Jack felt a protective surge course through him. These girls had clearly been abandoned, but why? And for how long had they been out there? Do you know what time Jenny brought you here? He asked. The girls looked at each other again, clearly confused by the question. Jack realized that children so young probably had no real sense of time. Was it dark? He tried. Emily nodded. Yes, but not super dark. The store lights were still on. Jack glanced at his watch. It was past 11 p.m. now. The grocery store closed at 10 p.m. The girls had been out there for at least an hour, possibly more. He made a decision at that moment. Protocol said he should wait for backup or social services, especially given the prominence of this family. But looking at those tired, frightened faces, Jack knew he couldn't just leave them sitting in his patrol car. Emily, Sarah, he said, turning fully to face them. How would you feel if I took you home? I bet your bed is much more comfortable than this car, right? The girls exchanged uncertain looks. Will Jenny be mad? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack felt his heart clench. Don't worry about Jenny right now. My job is to make sure you're safe, okay? Slowly, the girls nodded. Jack started the engine, a sense of determination settling in his chest. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he couldn't help noticing how the girls shrank back slightly at the sound of the motor. During the drive, Jack did his best to keep the conversation light, hoping to distract the girls from any fear or anxiety they might be feeling. So, girls, what's the best part about living in a big house? He asked, keeping his eyes on the road but watching them in the rearview mirror. Emily was the first to answer, her voice showing a little more enthusiasm. The garden. There's a huge swing and lots of flowers. Sarah nodded eagerly. And the treehouse that Daddy built. Jack smiled, relieved to see a bit of joy returning to their faces. Wow, a treehouse? That sounds amazing. Do you spend a lot of time there? The excitement on the girls' faces dimmed a bit. Not as much now, Emily said. Jenny doesn't like it when we make noise out there. Jack frowned but kept his tone casual. Oh, really? And what do you like to do inside the house then? Sarah spoke up this time. We like to draw, but we have to stay quiet in our room. The conversation continued like this, with Jack asking seemingly innocent questions and the girls answering. Bit by bit, a concerning picture formed in the officer's mind. The girls spoke of a life of material luxury, fancy toys, pretty clothes, delicious food. But there was a noticeable absence of warmth and affection in their descriptions. Jack noticed how they always referred to their stepmother as Jenny, never Mom or any affectionate term. And there was a subtle tension whenever they mentioned her, as if they were walking on eggshells even miles away from her. As they neared the more affluent area of Oakwood Hills, Jack couldn't help but notice inconsistencies in the girls' stories. In one moment, Emily said Jenny took them out every weekend. In the next, Sarah mentioned they hadn't left the house in weeks because Jenny didn't like how noisy they were in the car. These contradictions set off alarm bells in Jack's experienced mind. He had dealt with child neglect cases before, but never in such a privileged setting. It was disconcerting to think that even amid such wealth, 2 small children could be suffering. Driving through the tree-lined streets, passing increasingly imposing mansions, Jack couldn't help reflecting on past cases. Usually, neglect came hand in hand with poverty, addiction, lack of resources. But here, what could lead someone with every resource in the world to abandon 2 little girls in a cold parking lot? The obvious answer, that someone might simply be cruel was hard to swallow. Jack always tried to see the best in people, to believe there was an explanation or mitigating circumstance, but looking at Emily and Sarah in the rearview mirror, watching them lean against each other for comfort, it was hard to imagine any justification for what had happened that night. Finally, they turned onto a private street, and Jack felt his breath catch. At the end of the road rose the Blackwood mansion in all its grandeur. It was an imposing building, a blend of classic and modern architecture, with enormous windows that glowed softly in the night. Meticulously maintained gardens stretched in every direction, dotted with fountains and statues. As he approached the ornate gates, Jack felt a growing apprehension settle in his stomach. Something told him that what was about to happen would change the course of many lives, not just Emily and Sarah's, but his own. "We're here, girls," he said softly, stopping in front of the gates. Emily and Sarah looked out the window, and Jack noticed a mix of relief and apprehension on their faces. They were home, yes, but it was a home that apparently brought them as much comfort as it did fear. While waiting for the gates to open, Jack made a silent promise to himself and to those two innocent little girls. He would get to the bottom of this, no matter how powerful the Blackwood family was. Because no child, rich or poor, deserved what Emily and Sarah seemed to be going through. With a gentle creak, the gates began to open, and Jack guided the patrol car up the long driveway. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was determined to protect those girls, whatever the cost. Jack parked the police cruiser in front of the imposing entrance to Blackwood Mansion. The engine fell silent, leaving only the soft sound of the night breeze and the breathing of the two little girls in the back seat. He turned to Emily and Sarah, offering a reassuring smile. "We're here, girls. Let's go inside and sort this out, okay?" The twins nodded silently, their big eyes reflecting a mix of relief and apprehension. Jack stepped out of the car and opened the back door, helping the girls down. They immediately stuck close to each other, hands intertwined as if drawing strength from one another's presence. Jack climbed the marble steps that led to the main door, the girls right behind him. His finger hovered for a moment before pressing the doorbell. The melodic chime echoed inside the mansion, and Jack felt a strange tension gathering in his shoulders. Seconds that felt like an eternity passed before the door's handle moved. The heavy wooden door swung open, revealing an elegant woman in a silk robe. Jack's world seemed to freeze the instant his eyes met hers. A shock of recognition hit him like lightning. "Jennifer." The word slipped from his lips before he could hold it back. The woman in front of him, Jennifer Blackwood, the girl's stepmother, was someone Jack knew very well. Or at least, he thought he had. 10 years ago, she'd been Jennifer Collins, his college girlfriend, the first love he'd believed was forever. Jennifer, for her part, visibly paled. Her eyes, once warm in Jack's memory, now looked cold and calculating. "Jack?" Her voice was a tense whisper. "What are you doing here?" The initial shock gave way to a palpable tension. Jack struggled to maintain his professional composure, aware of the two little girls behind him. "Good evening, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, his voice turning formal. "I found Emily and Sarah alone in the supermarket parking lot. They said they were left there." Jennifer's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation crossing her face. "That's ridiculous," she said sharply. "The girls must have made up a story. They've been in bed for hours." Jack felt the girls edge closer to him, as if seeking protection. He took a step forward, partially blocking Jennifer's view of the children. "Jennifer, they were out there alone in the cold for at least an hour. This is serious." "It's Mrs. Blackwood to you, officer," Jennifer snapped back, her voice taking on a cutting tone Jack had never heard before. "I don't know what these girls told you, but I can assure you it's all lies. They have very active imaginations." Jack felt a pang of discomfort. The woman in front of him seemed like a distorted version of the Jennifer he'd once known. Where was the compassionate girl who used to volunteer on weekends, the dedicated student who dreamed of making a difference in the world? "Jennifer." "Mrs. Blackwood," Jack corrected himself. "We need to talk about this. Child abandonment is a very serious matter." Abandonment? Jennifer let out a humorless laugh. Are you accusing me of something, Officer Harris? The way she emphasized his title made Jack realize how much their positions had changed. 10 years ago, they were college sweethearts with simple dreams. Now, he was a patrol cop, and she was the wife of a billionaire. I'm not accusing anyone, Jack replied calmly. I'm just reporting what I saw and heard. The girl said you took them there. Jennifer crossed her arms, her stance exuding a chill Jack had never experienced from her before. Look, Jack, she said, lowering her voice. I don't know what kind of game you're playing here, but I suggest you stop now. You have no idea what kind of influence we have in this town. The veiled threat caught Jack by surprise. This was definitely not the Jennifer he once knew. Is that a threat, Mrs. Blackwood? Jennifer shrugged, a cold smile playing on her lips. Just a friendly reminder. After all, we're old friends, aren't we? At that moment, a housekeeper appeared behind Jennifer. Her eyes widened slightly upon seeing the girls, but she quickly masked her surprise. Maria, Jennifer said, without taking her eyes off Jack. Take the girls to their room. Make sure they get a hot bath. The housekeeper nodded quickly, reaching out for Emily and Sarah. The girls hesitated, looking fearfully at Jack. It's okay, Jack said softly, kneeling down to their level. Go with Maria. I'll make sure everything is fine, okay? Reluctantly, the twins followed the housekeeper into the mansion, casting worried glances over their shoulders as they disappeared down the hallway. Once the girls were out of sight, Jennifer's facade seemed to crack for a moment. She ran a hand over her face, suddenly looking very tired. What do you want, Jack? She asked, her voice quieter now. Money? Is that it? Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Money? You think that's what this is about? Jennifer, 2 children were found alone in the cold. This has nothing to do with money. Jennifer studied him for a long moment, as if trying to solve an especially difficult puzzle. You really haven't changed at all, have you? She finally said, a hint of something, maybe regret, in her voice. Still the same Jack, always trying to save the world. And you've changed too much, Jack replied, unable to hide the disappointment in his voice. What happened to you, Jen? The old nickname seemed to hit her like a slap. For a brief moment, Jack glimpsed the girl he used to know, vulnerable and unsure, but as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by the icy Mrs. Blackwood. Life happened, Jack, she said, lifting her chin. Not everyone can afford to hold on to childish ideals. Some of us had to grow up. Jack shook his head, a deep sadness settling in his chest. Growing up doesn't mean losing your humanity, Jennifer. Enough, Jennifer said abruptly. I've heard enough. The girls are home, safe and sound. Your job is done here, Officer Harris. Jack knew she was dismissing him, but he couldn't simply walk away. Not with so many questions unanswered, not with the lingering feeling that something was very wrong in that house. This isn't over, Jennifer, he said firmly. I'll need to file a report about the incident, and if I find any indication of neglect or abuse— You won't find anything, Jennifer interrupted, her voice full of cold certainty. Because there's nothing to find, and if you insist on this ridiculous crusade, Jack, I guarantee you'll regret it. There are bigger things at play here than you can imagine. With those words, she took a step back, ready to close the door, but before she could, Jack set his foot on the threshold. Jen, he said, using the nickname once more, his voice almost pleading. What happened to you, to the girl who wanted to change the world? Who cared about people? For a moment, something flickered in Jennifer's eyes, a hint of pain, maybe regret. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by an icy resolve. She grew up, Jack, and learned the world is a much more complicated place than we thought back in college. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 2 girls to look after. With a swift motion, she pushed the door, forcing Jack to step back. The heavy wooden door closed with a dull thud, leaving Jack alone on the porch, staring at his own distorted reflection in the polished surface. He stood there for a few moments, trying to process everything that had just happened. The unexpected reunion with Jennifer, the shocking transformation of his ex-girlfriend, the disturbing implications about the girls. It was too much to take in at once. Slowly, Jack descended the marble steps, each step weighted with the night's revelations. When he reached his patrol car, he paused, looking back at the imposing mansion. Soft lights glowed through the windows, a facade of normalcy that now seemed terribly deceptive. Sitting in the car, Jack didn't start the engine right away. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions in his chest. The shock of seeing Jennifer again still reverberated through him, mingled with deep concern for the girls and a growing resolve to uncover the truth behind it all. The Jennifer he'd known in college, kind, passionate, full of ideals, seemed completely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating woman who made thinly veiled threats. What could have caused such a drastic change? And, more importantly, what did it mean for Emily and Sarah? Jack opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the mansion ahead. Jennifer's words echoed in his mind. There are bigger things at play here than you can imagine. What had she meant by that? What dark secrets were hiding behind those elegant walls? One thing was certain. He couldn't simply ignore what had happened tonight. Regardless of his past with Jennifer, regardless of her threats, Jack had a duty to those little girls. He had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. With one last look at the mansion, Jack started the engine. As he pulled out through the ornate gates, a firm resolution took hold of his heart. He would get to the bottom of this, no matter how long it took or how hard it became. Emily and Sarah deserved that. And perhaps the memory of the Jennifer he once knew and loved deserved it too. The road ahead would be difficult. Jack knew that. He would be facing not just Jennifer, but all the power and influence of the Blackwood family. But as he drove through the quiet streets of Oakwood Hills, Jack felt a growing determination settle into his chest. Tonight had only been the beginning. A door to a larger mystery had been opened, and Jack was determined to walk through it, no matter the dangers that awaited on the other side. Because in the end he knew that truth and justice must prevail, not just for Emily and Sarah, but for all children who might be suffering in silence behind the elegant facades of places like this. With those turbulent thoughts, Jack disappeared into the night, leaving Blackwood Mansion and its secrets behind, at least for now. But he knew, with a certainty that resonated in every fiber of his being, that he would return. And when he did, he would be ready to face whatever he found. The night had brought shocking revelations and unearthed long-buried memories. But more than that, it had planted the seeds of an investigation that promised to shake the foundations of Oakwood Hills. And at the center of it all was Jack, a determined cop, a confused ex-boyfriend, and now the unlikely guardian of a secret that threatened to topple the carefully constructed world of the Blackwoods. As Jack's patrol car disappeared into the darkness, the lights of Blackwood Mansion continued to glow, seemingly serene. But behind those illuminated windows, secrets simmered, ready to surface. And Jack Harris would be the key to uncovering them all. The sun had barely risen when Jack Harris walked into the police station, determination etched on his tired face. The previous night had been a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries, but now it was time to turn that shock into action. He offered quick greetings to his colleagues, ignoring their curious looks as he made his way to his desk. Jack powered up his computer, and while waiting for the system to boot, his mind drifted back to the scenes of the previous night. The frightened faces of the twins, Emily and Sarah, still haunted him. And then there was Jennifer, the woman he once loved, now a cold, threatening stranger. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. There was work to do. He spent the first few hours conducting a thorough investigation into Jennifer Blackwood's current life. Local society magazines showed an elegant, smiling woman, always at her billionaire husband's side, Robert Blackwood, at charity events or major product launches from Blackwood Tech. At first glance, it all looked perfect. But Jack knew better. He dug deeper, searching for any mention of the twins. To his surprise, there were very few. Occasionally, there was a family photo with the girls dressed identically, shy smiles that never reached their eyes. Jack noticed how Jennifer was rarely photographed interacting directly with her stepdaughters. As the morning wore on, Jack decided it was time to visit the place where everything had begun, the supermarket. He drove there, parking his patrol car discreetly out back. The manager, a middle-aged man named Frank, greeted him with a concerned look. "Officer Harris, how can I help you?" Jack briefly explained that he was investigating an incident from the previous night, without revealing who was involved. Frank nodded and called over a few employees who had been on shift that night. The first to speak was a tall, thin security guard named Mike. "Yes, officer, I remember something strange last night," Mike said, scratching his chin. "Around 9:30 p.m. I saw a really fancy car pull into the lot. It was odd, you know. Not the kind of car we usually see around here." Jack nodded, encouraging him to continue. "The car stopped for a few minutes and then sped off. I thought about checking it out, but I had to deal with a teenager trying to shoplift some drinks." Jack took notes. "Were you able to see who was in the car?" Mike shook his head. "No, the windows were too dark. But it was a black Bentley, I'm sure of that." Jack felt his stomach tighten. He remembered seeing a black Bentley in the Blackwood Mansion's garage the previous night. Next to speak was a young cashier named Lisa. She looked nervous, wringing her hands as she talked. I saw the girls," she said quietly. "Two identical little girls. They hung around by my register for a while. I thought about asking if they were lost, but we got so busy and, God, I should have done something." Jack rested a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. "It's not your fault. Can you tell me how long you saw them?" Lisa frowned, thinking, "At least an hour, maybe more. They looked so scared." Jack thanked the employees and asked to see the security camera footage. Frank led him to a small back room lined with monitors showing different areas of the store. Heart pounding, Jack watched the videos from the previous night. At 9:27 p.m., a black Bentley entered the parking lot. At 9:29, two small figures exited the car. Then at 9:30, the car left. Jack asked for the angle showing the driver. The quality wasn't great, but there was no doubt. It was Jennifer. Her face was tense, almost frightened, as she looked around briefly before driving off. The subsequent footage showed Emily and Sarah wandering around the supermarket, clearly lost and scared. Jack felt a surge of anger seeing the girls shivering from the cold, clinging to each other for comfort. Thanking Frank, Jack left the store with his head spinning. He had visual proof that Jennifer had dropped the girls off. But why? What would make a woman abandon two small children in the cold? Back at the police station, Jack began to build a detailed timeline of events. He noted multiple inconsistencies. Jennifer claimed the girls were in bed, but the cameras showed her dropping them off at the supermarket. The time the girls spent alone was longer than initially estimated. Jennifer's behavior on camera didn't look like someone carrying out a well-thought plan, but rather someone acting under pressure. The more Jack looked at the facts, the more he became convinced there was something bigger going on. He decided it was time to dig deeper into Jennifer's recent behavior. Using his contacts, Jack managed to track down some former employees of the Blackwood Mansion. The first person he interviewed was a former nanny named Maria Rodriguez. Maria met him at a discreet cafe away from the upscale neighborhoods. She appeared nervous, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. "Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for meeting me," Jack began gently. "Can you tell me about your time working for the Blackwoods?" Maria hesitated briefly before speaking. "The girls, they're angels, so sweet, so kind. But Mrs. Blackwood, she wasn't a good mother to them." Jack leaned forward, interested. "How so?" "She was cold," Maria explained, her voice low. "I never saw her hug the girls, never heard a word of affection. It was like the children were an inconvenience to her." Jack felt a knot in his stomach. This didn't sound anything like the Jennifer he used to know. Can you give me specific examples? Maria nodded sadly. Once, Emily got sick. High fever, poor thing. Mrs. Blackwood wouldn't even see her. Said I should handle it and not bother her. Who does that to a sick child? Jack took thorough notes, his heart heavy. And Mr. Blackwood? How was he with the girls? Oh, he loved them, Maria said, a small smile flickering across her face. When he was home, he spent all his time with them, but he traveled a lot, and when he was away... What happened when he was away? Jack prompted gently. Maria hesitated again. Mrs. Blackwood. She changed. She became more irritable, colder. The girls were afraid of her. Jack thanked Maria for her time, promising to keep her identity confidential. As she left, he couldn't stop thinking about the Jennifer he'd known in college, a young woman passionate about children who spoke excitedly about becoming a teacher and making a difference. How could she have turned into this distant, unfeeling person? Next on Jack's list was a former driver named Thomas Green. They met at a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. Thomas was a burly man with calloused hands that gripped Jack's firmly. Officer Harris, I hear you're asking questions about the Blackwoods. Jack nodded, ordering 2 beers. I'm investigating an incident involving the twins. Any information you can provide would be helpful. Thomas took a long swig of his beer before speaking. I've worked for a lot of wealthy families over the years, but the Blackwoods, there was something off about that place. How so? The fights, Thomas said, lowering his voice. Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood argued a lot, especially about the girls. Jack leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of arguments? Mrs. Blackwood, she wanted to send the girls away. Boarding schools, summer camps, anything to keep them out of the house. Mr. Blackwood always said no, but the fights got more heated every time. Jack took more notes. Did you hear anything specific in those fights? Thomas frowned, thinking back. Once, I heard Mrs. Blackwood say something like, they're ruining everything. I didn't catch the context, but she sounded furious. Thanking Thomas, Jack left the bar with even more questions than before. The picture that was forming was deeply disturbing, to say the least. Back at the station, Jack decided to look into the girls' school records. What he found baffled him. In the last 2 years, Emily and Sarah had changed schools 4 times. Each change coincided with a period when Robert Blackwood was traveling on business. Why would anyone move such young children from school to school so often? Jack murmured to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. His next stop was the local hospital. Using his authority as a police officer, Jack accessed Emily and Sarah's medical records. What he found made his blood run cold. There were several reports of routine checkups, but what caught Jack's attention were the pediatrician's notes. Phrases like delayed emotional development, signs of anxiety, and possible emotional neglect appeared repeatedly. One particular report disturbed him deeply. It was from a child psychologist who had examined the girls 6 months earlier. Emily and Sarah Blackwood exhibit clear signs of emotional stress. They demonstrate excessive attachment to each other, possibly as a coping mechanism in an emotionally cold home environment. Strongly recommend regular psychological support and a thorough evaluation of the family setting. Jack closed the file, feeling nauseous. How could this have gone unnoticed for so long? How could children from such a prominent family be suffering like this, right under everyone's nose? The discrepancy between the Jennifer he once knew and the woman he was discovering was almost impossible to reconcile. He remembered a young woman who loved children, who talked excitedly about teaching and helping kids. How could she have become someone capable of treating them, her own stepdaughters, with such coldness? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Jack decided to take the next step in his investigation. He knew it was risky, possibly illegal, but he saw no other option. Using his contacts in the police, he gained access to the Blackwood family's financial records. What he uncovered astonished him. Over the past 18 months, Jennifer had made a series of large transfers to offshore accounts. The sums were astronomical, adding up to millions of dollars. Why would she need so much money hidden away? Jack wondered, frowning at the computer screen. Digging further, Jack found something even more unsettling. There were numerous emails exchanged between Jennifer and a school in Switzerland, an exclusive and extremely expensive boarding institution. The emails discussed the possible enrollment of Emily and Sarah for the upcoming school year. She really is planning on sending them away, Jack muttered, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Diving deeper into the records, Jack noted a pattern in Robert Blackwood's schedule. The billionaire spent long periods out of the country, sometimes months at a time, leaving Jennifer as the main, and often sole, caregiver of the girls. As the puzzle pieces began to fit together, Jack felt a chill run down his spine. There was something bigger going on here, something beyond simple neglect or emotional coldness. The large sums of money, the plans to ship the girls off, the increasing isolation, it all pointed to a calculated scheme. But what was Jennifer's endgame? What could she possibly gain by abandoning her stepdaughters and potentially destroying her family? Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had enough evidence to justify a formal investigation, possibly even Child Protective Services involvement. But something still nagged at him. If he acted too hastily, Jennifer could use her influence to cover everything up. And if there was something even larger at stake, something he still hadn't uncovered. After hours of deliberation, Jack made a decision. He needed to confront Jennifer again, this time armed with all the evidence he'd gathered. It was risky, possibly dangerous, but he knew it was the only way to truly understand what was happening and, more importantly, to protect Emily and Sarah. With renewed resolve, Jack began to organize all his findings. He compiled a detailed dossier, including copies of surveillance footage, financial records, medical reports, and statements from former employees. As he worked, the image of Jennifer, the Jennifer he'd known so many years ago, continued to haunt him. How could someone change so drastically? What could have happened to turn a once idealistic young woman into a person capable of such callousness and possible cruelty? Jack knew he was about to wade into dangerous waters. The Blackwoods were powerful, influential, capable of crushing his career with a phone call. But when he thought of Emily and Sarah's frightened faces, he realized he had no choice. With a deep sigh, Jack closed the dossier. Tomorrow he would confront Jennifer again, and this time he wouldn't leave without answers. As night fell over Oakwood Hills, Jack remained at his desk, meticulously reviewing every detail of his investigation. He knew the showdown with Jennifer would be a turning point, not only for the case, but potentially for his career and personal life as well. As he organized his notes and evidence, Jack couldn't help reflecting on the complexity of the situation. Each new discovery seemed to raise more questions than answers. Why was Jennifer stashing so much money in offshore accounts? What was the true reason behind sending the girls to a Swiss boarding school? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, what had happened to turn Jennifer into someone capable of these actions? Jack knew he was about to stir up a hornet's nest. The Blackwoods weren't just wealthy, they were powerful. Confronting Jennifer directly was risky, but he saw no other option. The lives of Emily and Sarah were at stake. Glancing at the clock, Jack realized it was well past midnight. He rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the weight of the entire investigation bearing down on him. Tomorrow would be a critical day, one that could change everything. With one last look at the dossier he'd prepared, Jack shut down his computer and stood up. Walking through the nearly empty station, he felt a mix of determination and apprehension. Whatever happened tomorrow, he knew there would be no turning back. When he got home, exhausted yet mentally wired, Jack couldn't fall asleep right away. Lying in bed, he mentally replayed every detail of the case, every clue, every inconsistency. The security footage of Jennifer abandoning the girls blended with memories of happier times, when they were young and in love. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, Jack fell into a fitful sleep. His dreams were a jumbled mix of past and present, hope and fear. In one moment, he was back at college, laughing with Jennifer under an autumn sun. In the next, he was at Blackwood Mansion, running through endless corridors, hearing distant cries from children he couldn't reach. When the alarm rang, Jack woke with a start, heart pounding. The day had arrived. Today, he would confront Jennifer and demand answers. Today, he would fight for the truth and for the safety of two innocent girls. With renewed resolve, Jack got ready and stepped out into the early morning. As he left his house, the rising sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets of Oakwood Hills. Jack had no idea what awaited him, but he was prepared to face whatever came. The beginning of the investigation was drawing to a close, but the true battle was only just starting. With every step toward Blackwood Mansion, Jack was moving closer not just to a confrontation with Jennifer, but to revelations that could shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculate lawn of Blackwood Mansion as Jack Harris parked his police cruiser near the ornate gate. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the dossier in his hands and the responsibility on his shoulders. This was the moment of truth. Walking with steady steps toward the main door, Jack's racing heart contrasted with the determined expression on his face. He rang the doorbell, the melodic chime echoing through the mansion. Seconds that felt like forever passed before the door opened, revealing Jennifer Blackwood. "Officer Harris," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "To what do I owe this unannounced visit?" Jack kept his gaze locked on hers. "Mrs. Blackwood, we need to talk. It's about Emily and Sarah." For a brief moment, Jack saw something. Fear, anger, flash in Jennifer's eyes. But as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by a polished mask of indifference. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Let's speak in the office." Jack followed her down the opulent hallway, noting how Jennifer maintained a rigid posture, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. She led him into a spacious office, furnished with mahogany pieces and shelves filled with books that looked untouched. "So, officer," Jennifer began, sitting behind an imposing desk, "what brings you here today?" Jack remained standing, placing the dossier on the desk. "I have some questions about the night I found Emily and Sarah at the supermarket parking lot." Jennifer arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "I thought we'd already cleared up that misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Jennifer," Jack said, voice firm. "I have evidence that you deliberately left the girls there." Her face hardened. "That's absurd." "You have no proof." Jack opened the dossier, spreading photos and documents across the desk. "I have security camera footage showing you dropping off the girls. I have statements from the supermarket staff, and much more." Jennifer glanced at the documents, her composure beginning to crack. That means nothing. You don't understand the context. Then explain it to me," Jack pressed. "Explain why you abandoned two small children in the cold. Explain the money transfers to offshore accounts. Explain the plans to send them to a boarding school abroad." Silence followed, heavy with tension. Jennifer looked at Jack and then at the documents and back at him. Something in her eyes shifted, as if she'd made a decision. "You want the truth, Jack," she said, her voice taking on a tone he'd never heard before. "The truth is that I never wanted these kids. They're a constant reminder that I'm the second wife, the replacement." Jack felt as though he'd been punched. "Jennifer, what are you talking about?" She stood, walking over to the window. "You have no idea what it's like to live in this world, Jack. The luxury, the power, the expectations, it's intoxicating. And I'm not going to let two brats ruin everything I've worked for." "Worked for," Jack repeated, incredulous. "You married a billionaire." Jennifer turned, her eyes shining with cold ambition. "And you think that was easy? You think any girl can just show up and win over someone like Robert Blackwood? I planned this. I molded myself. I became exactly what he wanted." Jack shook his head, struggling to comprehend the transformation of the woman in front of him. "And the girls? They're innocent in all of this." "They're an obstacle," Jennifer spat. "Robert adores them, of course, the perfect father when he's around. But he's always traveling, always busy. and I'm stuck with the constant reminder that I'll never be the first, the real Mrs. Blackwood. So you tried to get rid of them, Jack concluded, horror evident in his voice. Jennifer shrugged, a disturbingly casual gesture given the weight of her words. I tried to do things discreetly. Boarding schools, summer camps, anything to keep them away. But Robert always interfered. And the money. The offshore transfers. A cold smile formed on Jennifer's lips. Precautions, Jack. In this world, you never know when you'll need an escape hatch. Jack felt a wave of nausea. This was not the Jennifer he'd once loved. This was a stranger, cold, calculating, willing to harm innocent children out of ambition and greed. You can't be serious, he said, his voice almost pleading. The Jennifer I knew would never do this. She laughed, a joyless sound. That Jennifer was an idealistic fool. She grew up, Jack. She learned how the world really works. Jack stepped closer, his voice resolute. This ends now, Jennifer. I'm reporting all of this to the authorities. The girls need protection. At that moment, Jennifer's expression shifted, the mask of coldness replaced by something more calculating. Come on, Jack. We're both adults here. I'm sure we can come to an understanding. An understanding, Jack repeated, incredulous. Jennifer approached, her expensive perfume enveloping him. Think about it. How much does a police officer like you make? I could change your life, Jack. All you have to do is forget this little investigation. Jack felt his stomach turn. Who you're trying to bribe me? I'm offering you an opportunity, Jennifer replied softly. Enough money for you to retire comfortably, maybe move somewhere sunny, all in exchange for a bit of discretion. For a moment, Jack was speechless, shocked at Jennifer's audacity. Was this really the same woman he'd fallen for years ago? The transformation was so complete, so shocking, that he could hardly believe it. You really think I'd accept that, Jack finally said, his voice trembling with contained anger. That I'd ignore what you did to those kids for money? Jennifer shrugged, stepping back. Everyone has a price, Jack. I was just trying to find yours. At that moment, the sound of a door opening echoed through the house. Jennifer froze, her eyes widening in alarm. Jennifer, I'm home! A man's voice echoed down the hallway. Robert, Jennifer whispered, panic evident in her voice. He wasn't supposed to be here. Footsteps approached the office, and seconds later Robert Blackwood entered the room. He was a tall, distinguished man, with grey flecks in his hair, and the confident air of someone who'd spent years at the top of the corporate world. Jennifer, darling, He stopped abruptly upon seeing Jack. What's going on here? Jack turned to face Robert, aware of the palpable tension in the air. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Officer Jack Harris. I'm here about an incident involving your daughters. Robert frowned, looking from Jack to Jennifer. What incident? Jennifer, what's he talking about? Jennifer opened her mouth to reply, but Jack was faster. Mr. Blackwood, there's evidence that your daughters were deliberately left in a parking lot a few nights ago. I'm investigating possible neglect and abuse. Robert's face went pale. What? That's impossible. Jennifer, tell him it's a misunderstanding. Jack watched Jennifer, seeing how she fought to regain her composure. Robert, dear, it's nothing like that. Officer Harris is confused. I'm not confused, Mrs. Blackwood, Jack said firmly. I have concrete evidence, and including surveillance footage. Robert staggered slightly, bracing himself on the desk. I don't understand. Jennifer, what's going on? The air in the office was charged with tension. Jack could see Jennifer calculating her options, her gaze darting between him and Robert. This is ridiculous, she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. Robert, you can't believe this. It's obviously some kind of extortion attempt. Jack felt his patience wearing thin. Enough lies, Jennifer. Tell your husband the truth, or I will. Robert looked from Jack to Jennifer, confusion and fear evident on his face. Jennifer. For a moment, it seemed she would continue denying everything. But then, something in her expression shifted. Her shoulders sagged, and a bitter smile appeared on her lips. You know what, Robert? Yes, it's true. I left your precious little girls in that parking lot. And you know what else? It was a relief. Robert reeled as if he'd been slapped. What? How could you? Jennifer laughed, a cold, humorless sound. How could I? How could you make me live in the shadow of your late wife all these years? How could you expect me to love children that constantly remind me I'm just a replacement? Jack watched the scene unfold, aware that he was witnessing the collapse of a marriage and possibly an empire. Robert looked completely stunned, unable to process what he was hearing. I need to see my daughters, Robert finally said, his voice trembling. Where are Emily and Sarah? At school, Jennifer replied coldly. Where I don't have to look at them? Robert turned to Jack, his eyes pleading. Officer, please tell me my daughters are safe. Jack nodded gravely. They're safe, Mr. Blackwood, but I strongly advise you to take immediate steps to ensure their security and well-being. Robert nodded, seeming to age years in that moment. Yes, of course. I need to call my lawyer. Jennifer let out a bitter laugh. Oh yes, call the lawyers. We'll see who comes out on top, Robert. Jack had seen enough. He gathered his evidence, aware that what he had witnessed was only the tip of the iceberg. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood, he said formally. I'll be reporting all of this to the relevant authorities. I advise you both to fully cooperate with the upcoming investigation. Jennifer glared at him with pure hatred. You have no idea what you started here today, Jack. You have no idea what forces you're toying with. Jack met her gaze without wavering. What I know is that 2 innocent children need protection, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they get it. With those words, Jack left the office, leaving behind the chaos he had set in motion. As he walked down the hallway, he could still hear Jennifer and Robert's raised voices echoing behind him. Stepping out of the mansion, Jack took a deep breath of the cool afternoon air. His heart still pounded, his mind racing with all that had happened. The Jennifer he once knew and loved had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating woman he barely recognized. Yet despite the shock and sadness he felt, Jack knew he had done the right thing. Emily and Sarah needed protection, and he was determined to see they got it. Driving back to the police station, Jack knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would be investigations, possibly a trial, certainly media attention. The Blackwoods were powerful, and Jennifer would not go down without a fight. But Jack was prepared to face whatever came next, because in the end, it all came down to 2 innocent little girls who deserved a chance to grow up in safety and love. And he would do everything in his power to give them that chance. The sun began to set as Jack reached the police station, bathing the city in a golden glow. It was the end of a day that had changed many lives, including his own. But it was also the start of a new journey, a journey in pursuit of justice and the protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. With renewed determination, Jack walked into the station. There was much work to be done, and he was ready to face whatever the future held. Dawn broke with a palpable sense of urgency. Jack Harris arrived at the police station before sunrise, determined to act quickly to protect Emily and Sarah. His first phone call was to Child Protective Services, CPS. "This is Officer Jack Harris," he said, the moment they picked up. "I have an urgent case involving possible neglect and emotional abuse of 2 minors. Jack spent the next hour detailing his discoveries to Sarah Johnson, an experienced social worker. He shared the evidence of the supermarket abandonment, the suspicious financial records, and the disturbing accounts of former staff at Blackwood Mansion. "This is very serious, Officer Harris," Sarah said, her tone grave. "I'll open an official investigation immediately. We'll need to interview the children and assess their home environment." Jack nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I understand. And what about the immediate safety of the girls?" "Given the nature of the allegations, we can file for a temporary removal order," Sarah explained, "but we'll need a judge to approve it." Over the following hours, a series of events unfolded quickly. A CPS team was dispatched to the girls' school for an initial assessment. Simultaneously, An emergency petition was filed with the local family court. Jack worked tirelessly with the social workers, providing all the information he'd collected. He was determined not to let a single detail slip, knowing every piece of evidence could be crucial in ensuring the girl's safety. Meanwhile, at Blackwood Mansion, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Upon learning of the official investigation, Jennifer swung between panicked rage and desperate denials. She alternated between legal threats and pleas of innocence. Robert Blackwood, who had initially refused to believe the allegations against his wife, began to see the reality of the situation. The evidence Jack presented and Jennifer's volatile reaction were opening his eyes to a truth he might have ignored for too long. "I can't believe I was so blind," Robert muttered to himself, watching Jennifer shout at her lawyer over the phone. Anticipating that Jennifer might attempt something drastic, Jack arranged discreet surveillance of the mansion. 2 plainclothes officers were positioned in an unmarked car a safe distance away, ready to intervene if necessary. By afternoon, the judge granted a temporary removal of custody. Emily and Sarah would be placed in emergency foster care until a more thorough investigation could be conducted. Jack was present when the girls were taken from school. His heart clenched at the fear and confusion on their faces. "Hi, Emily, Sarah," he said gently, crouching down to their eye level. "Do you remember me?" The twins nodded timidly. "You're the officer who helped us," Emily said softly. Jack smiled, trying to reassure them. "That's right, I'm here to help again. You'll be staying with a really nice family for a little while, okay? Just until we figure some things out." Sarah, the social worker, explained the situation as gently as possible. Despite her efforts, it was clear the children were scared and confused. As the girls were led away, Jack couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and concern. He knew he'd done the right thing, but he also knew the road ahead would be difficult for everyone involved. Back at the station, Jack received an enraged phone call from Jennifer. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed into the phone. "I will destroy you, Jack. By the time I'm finished, you'll wish you never meddled in my family's affairs." Jack stayed calm, though a chill ran down his spine. He knew Jennifer was dangerous, especially now that she felt cornered. The next few weeks promised to be intense. There would be interviews, psychological evaluations, court hearings. Jack knew he would be at the center of it all, walking a line between his duty as an officer and his personal desire to see justice served. As night fell over Oakwood Hills, Jack looked out his office window, thinking of Emily and Sarah. He hoped that despite the trauma and confusion, they would finally get the love and safety they deserved. The path ahead would be long and hard, but Jack was determined to see it through to the end. For Emily, for Sarah, and for all children who needed someone to stand up for them. It was an exceptionally dark night when Jack's radio crackled with urgency. "All units, we have an alert at Blackwood Mansion. Suspected attempt to flee with minors." Jack's heart pounded. He'd feared something like this might happen. Without hesitation, he hit the siren and sped toward the mansion, praying he'd arrive in time. Meanwhile, inside Blackwood Mansion, Jennifer moved stealthily through the dark corridors. Emily and Sarah, still groggy and confused, were led by her with a firm grip. "Come on, girls," Jennifer whispered, a mix of urgency and anger in her tone. "We're going on a trip." The twins exchanged anxious glances but didn't dare question her. Their fear of Jennifer was deeply ingrained. Jack arrived at the gates just as a luxury car was attempting to leave. He blocked the exit with his cruiser, jumping out with his weapon drawn. "Stop the vehicle right now, Jennifer," he shouted. The car screeched to a halt and Jennifer stepped out, dragging the girls with her. Her eyes blazed with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Get out of my way, Jack," she hissed. "You have no idea what you're doing." Jack held his ground, striving for calm despite the tension in the air. "It's over, Jennifer." "Let the girls go," Jennifer laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Over? This is far from over." She pulled the girls closer, using them as a shield. "Do you really think you can stop me? I'm a Blackwood. I have more power than you could ever dream of." The girls trembled, their wide, frightened eyes fixed on Jack, silently begging for help. "Think about what you're doing," Jack said, voice firm but gentle. "You're scaring the children. This will only make things worse for you." For a moment, it seemed Jennifer might reconsider, but then her face twisted with fury. "You ruined everything, Jack, my perfect life, my future, all because of these little brats." At that moment, headlights illuminated the scene. Robert Blackwood emerged from his car, shock and horror registering on his face as he took in what was happening. "Jennifer, what is this?" he asked, voice trembling. Jennifer turned to face him, still gripping the girls. "Oh, hello, dear. You arrived just in time to watch everything fall apart." Robert took a step closer, hands extended in a gesture of peace. "Jennifer, please let the girls go. We can talk about this." "Talk?" Jennifer screamed. "There's nothing to talk about. These kids ruined everything. I should have sent them away years ago." Robert paled, finally seeing his wife's true colors. "My God, Jennifer, what happened to you?" Taking advantage of the distraction, Emily and Sarah managed to slip from Jennifer's grasp. In the blink of an eye, they ran toward Jack, clinging to his legs for protection. Jennifer let out a cry of rage, lunging toward Jack and the girls, but before she could reach them, Robert grabbed her, holding her tightly. "Enough, Jennifer," he shouted. "It's over." At that moment, several police cars arrived, their lights flashing in the darkness. Officers jumped out, quickly taking control of the situation. Jennifer was detained, still screaming threats as she was placed in the squad car. "This isn't over. You'll all regret this. Every one of you." Jack knelt down, hugging Emily and Sarah, who sobbed softly. "It's okay now," he murmured. "You're safe." Robert watched the scene, looking utterly lost. He approached Jack and the girls hesitantly. I'm sorry," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea. How could I have been so blind?" Jack looked at him with a mix of compassion and firmness. "What matters now is taking care of these girls, Mr. Blackwood. They're going to need a lot of support and love." Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. He knelt beside Jack, opening his arms to his daughters. After a moment's hesitation, Emily and Sarah ran into their father's embrace. While the police wrapped up Jennifer's arrest, Jack watched the family reunion. The road ahead would be long and tough, but at least now there was hope. The night that began with so much tension and danger ended with the promise of a new beginning. The stars shone overhead, silent witnesses to a battle that had finally reached its conclusion. The sun had barely risen when Jennifer Blackwood was taken to the interrogation room at the Central Police Station in Oakwood Hills. Sitting stiffly on a metal chair, she glared at the two-way mirror with an icy look, her lips pressed into a thin line of determination. Two seasoned detectives entered the room, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the situation. For hours, they tried to get answers from Jennifer, asking about the girl's abandonment, the suspicious money transfers, and her plans to send the twins abroad. But Jennifer remained stubbornly silent, answering only with an occasional no comment or "I'll speak only with my lawyer." Meanwhile, a team of investigators was meticulously searching Blackwood Mansion and the Blackwood Tech offices. Every document, every email, every financial record was examined with a fine-tooth comb. What they found was disturbing. In addition to the evidence Jack had already gathered, investigators discovered a detailed diary Jennifer kept, outlining her plans to get rid of her stepdaughters. There were notes about boarding schools in Europe, contacts with attorneys specializing in international custody, and even research on how to alter identification documents. In another part of the station, Robert Blackwood faced his own interrogation. Unlike his wife, he talked non-stop, a mix of confession and remorse. "I should have known," he repeated, running his hands through his hair in despair. The constant trips, the girls switching schools, their withdrawn behavior. How could I have been so blind? The detective questioning him kept a neutral expression, but asked pointed questions. "Mr. Blackwood, in all these years, you never suspected something was wrong?" Robert lowered his head, shame evident in his posture. I guess I didn't want to see. Jennifer always had an explanation, always made it seem like she was acting in the girl's best interests. And I was too busy with the company to question her. Meanwhile, in a specially designed children's interview room, Emily and Sarah were gently questioned by specialized child psychologists. Their revelations were heartbreaking. "Jenny doesn't like it when we make noise," Sarah said quietly, clinging to a stuffed bear. "She says kids should be seen, not heard." Emily nodded, adding, "Sometimes, when Daddy travels, Jenny locks us in our room. She says it's a game, but it's not fun." The specialists exchanged worried glances. The pattern of emotional abuse and neglect was becoming painfully clear. In the midst of this storm of revelations, Jack Harris worked relentlessly, handing over every shred of evidence he'd gathered during his investigation. His detailed reports, security footage, and witness statements now formed the backbone of the case against Jennifer Blackwood. News of the scandal leaked to the press almost immediately. Within hours, the story was on every newspaper front page and TV channel. Billionaire's wife accused of abandoning stepdaughters, Blackwood family scandal, neglect and abuse. The dark side of the fairy tale, the fall of Mrs. Blackwood. Reporters gathered outside the police station and Blackwood mansion, desperate for any scraps of information. Speculation ran wild, with experts brought in to comment on everything from child psychology to the implications for the Blackwood tech empire. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with journalists, onlookers, and prominent local figures all vying for a seat to watch the drama unfold. Jennifer entered the courtroom with her head held high, her immaculate Chanel suit clashing with the handcuffs on her wrists. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering briefly on Jack, seated in the front row, and on Robert, who looked like he'd aged decades in just a few weeks. The judge opened the proceedings, and the prosecutor began to lay out the case against Jennifer. The evidence was overwhelming. The supermarket abandonment, the suspicious financial records, the ex-employee's testimony, and the unsettling accounts from Emily and Sarah themselves. Jennifer remained impassive through it all, her face a mask of indifference. But when it was time for her defense to speak, something unexpected happened. Jennifer stood abruptly, ignoring her lawyer's urgent whispers. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and firm, "I would like to make a statement." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. "Proceed, Mrs. Blackwood." Jennifer took a deep breath, then spoke words that shocked everyone. "My maiden name is Jennifer Collins. 15 years ago, my father, Thomas Collins, owned Collins Innovations, a promising tech company. We had a comfortable life, and I was about to start college with a bright future." She paused, locking eyes with Robert, who stared at her in growing confusion. "But then," Jennifer continued, bitterness creeping into her voice, "Robert Blackwood stepped in. With his aggressive business tactics and insatiable thirst for power, he orchestrated a hostile takeover of my father's company. It wasn't just a deal, it was a calculated destruction." Robert paled, clearly recalling the business deal. "My father lost everything," Jennifer went on, her voice trembling slightly. "Our home, our savings, everything. He fell into a deep depression and never fully recovered. And I had to give up my dreams, working low-paying jobs to help support our family." The courtroom was silent, every eye on Jennifer. "That's when I decided," she said, her tone cold and calculating once more. "Robert Blackwood had destroyed my family from the inside out. I would do the same to him. I spent years reinventing myself, molding myself to be exactly the kind of woman who would catch the eye of a recently widowed billionaire." Audible gasps rippled through the room. Robert looked as though he might faint. "Our marriage, a farce, every smile, every affectionate gesture, all part of my plan. I intended to destroy Robert Blackwood the same way he destroyed my father, from the inside, ruin his reputation, drive him apart from his daughters, and eventually leave him with nothing, just as he left my family. Jennifer then turned her gaze directly to Jack. Abandoning the girls at the supermarket, that was calculated. I knew someone would eventually find them. It was supposed to be the beginning of the end, the first step in tarnishing Robert Blackwood's perfect image. The courtroom was in shock. Jack felt as though the ground had fallen away beneath his feet. Robert Blackwood had slumped in his seat, clearly overwhelmed by the revelation. My final plan, Jennifer continued, voice almost a whisper, was to take the girls far away to a place where Robert would never find them. He'd be left without his precious heirs, his reputation in tatters, his empire collapsing around him, exactly like my father was. She paused, glancing around the courtroom. I don't regret what I did. The only thing I regret is getting caught before I could finish my revenge. With those final words, Jennifer sat down, leaving stunned silence in her wake. The judge, visibly shaken, called for a 1-hour recess, allowing everyone time to process what they'd just heard. As people filtered out of the courtroom, Jack wrestled with a storm of emotions. Shock, anger, sadness, and a hint of guilt for not realizing sooner the true nature of Jennifer's scheme. Robert Blackwood looked like a broken man. He stared into space, Jennifer's words clearly echoing in his mind. The weight of his own past actions, now coming back to haunt him in a way he never imagined, was etched into every line of his aged face. Reporters in the courtroom could barely contain their excitement. This wasn't just a child neglect scandal in a rich family. It was a drama of revenge, betrayal, and far-reaching consequences that spanned more than a decade. During the recess, frantic whispers filled the courthouse corridors. Theories were exchanged, opinions formed and reformed. The Blackwood case, already sensational, had become far more complex and shocking than anyone could have anticipated. When the judge finally called everyone back, the tension and anticipation were palpable. What would happen next? How could the justice system handle such a tangled, emotionally charged case? One thing was certain. The truth revealed that day would forever change the lives of everyone involved, with repercussions felt far beyond the courthouse walls. Jack Harris sat at his desk in the police station, surrounded by stacks of documents and old records. After Jennifer's shocking courtroom revelation, he knew he had to dig deeper to unravel the past that had led to this tragic situation. Starting with Jennifer's father's name, Thomas Collins, Jack scoured old newspaper archives, business records, and financial reports. The story that emerged was heartbreaking. 15 years ago, Collins Innovations was a promising tech startup. Thomas Collins, a brilliant engineer with multiple patents, had built the company from scratch. Financial reports showed steady growth and optimistic projections. Then Robert Blackwood entered the scene. Jack found a series of articles detailing the hostile takeover of Collins Innovations by Blackwood Tech. Robert's tactics were aggressive and, in some cases, borderline unethical. He exploited a loophole in investment contracts, pressured suppliers to break deals with Collins, and even spread rumors about the company's financial stability. Within months, Collins Innovations went bankrupt. Thomas Collins lost everything: his company, his home, his savings. One particularly painful article described him leaving the building of his former company, carrying a box of personal belongings, the empty look of a defeated man. Jack uncovered medical records showing Thomas Collins had been hospitalized for severe depression just weeks after the bankruptcy. He never returned to the tech industry. Confronted with these facts, Robert Blackwood looked like a man on the verge of collapse. I didn't know," he murmured, rubbing his tired eyes. "It was just business. I never thought about the families behind the companies I acquired." Jennifer, for her part, shared more details of her revenge plot during subsequent interviews. She described how she spent years studying Robert, learning his tastes, habits, and weaknesses. "I became the perfect woman for him," she said, a cold smile on her lips. "Every gesture, every word, was calculated to make him fall for me." She spoke of how she planned to use the girls in her vendetta. They were innocent, of course, but they were Robert's weak point. I knew driving them away from him would be the final blow. Jack listened with a mixture of horror and fascination. It was hard to reconcile the Jennifer he'd known in college with this cold, calculating woman. One of the hardest aspects of the case was explaining the situation to Emily and Sarah. A team of child trauma therapists was brought in to help. The girls, still so young, struggled to grasp the complexity of it all. "So, Jenny isn't our real mother?" Emily asked, her small voice full of confusion. "And she doesn't love us," Sarah added, tears welling up in her eyes. The therapists did their best to explain in a way the children could understand, emphasizing that none of it was their fault and that they were deeply loved by their father and many others. Jack watched it all unfold, feeling the weight of how far-reaching the consequences of past actions could be. A business deal made 15 years ago had set in motion a chain of events that led to this moment: destroyed lives, a broken family, 2 innocent children traumatized. He couldn't help reflecting on how our actions, however insignificant they might seem at the time, could have repercussions far beyond what we could imagine. Robert Blackwood never dreamed his hostile takeover would lead to this. Jennifer, in her quest for revenge, never fully considered the harm she'd inflict on innocent children. As the case continued to unfold, Jack knew there would be more revelations and ramifications. The past had been brought to light, but the future remained uncertain for everyone involved. The courtroom was packed on the day Jennifer Blackwood formally faced the charges against her. The buzz in the crowd died down when she walked in, escorted by officers, her face a mask of determination. Jack Harris, seated in the front row, couldn't help noticing how much she seemed to have aged. Deeper lines around her eyes, her posture less haughty. The prosecutor presented the case with ruthless efficiency, detailing every accusation: child neglect, abandonment, fraud, attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming, each piece meticulously gathered by Jack and his team. But when Jennifer's defense attorney rose, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. He didn't try to deny her actions. Instead, he painted a vivid picture of a young woman traumatized by her family's downfall, consumed by a desire for justice that turned into an obsessive quest for vengeance. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "we are not here to deny Mrs. Blackwood's actions. We are here to understand them, to see how a chain of events, set in motion 15 years ago, led us to this tragic moment." He went on to detail the collapse of the Collins family, Thomas Collins's emotional breakdown, and the years of struggle and privation that followed. Jennifer sat rigidly beside him, eyes downcast, but Jack could see her shoulders tremble slightly. "Mrs. Blackwood does not seek absolution," the lawyer concluded. "She seeks understanding and perhaps a chance at redemption." When Jennifer finally spoke, her voice was low but steady. "I know what I did was wrong," she said, addressing the jury directly. "But at the time it felt like the only way to get justice. I was wrong, and I'm prepared to face the consequences of my actions." The judge listened intently, his face betraying a mix of severity and empathy. When he pronounced the sentence, it carried a balance of punishment and acknowledgement of her trauma. Jennifer received 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5, and was ordered to undergo intensive therapy. As Jennifer was led away, her eyes met Jack's for a brief moment. In that glance, he saw a complicated mix of emotions: regret, resignation, and, surprisingly, a glimmer of the warmth he once knew. Across town, in the now quiet Blackwood mansion, Robert Blackwood faced his own judgment, not in a court of law, but in the mirror of his conscience. The revelations of recent weeks had shaken him to his core, forcing him to re-examine every decision, every tactic that had brought him to the top. Seated in his office, surrounded by trophies and acknowledgements that now felt hollow, Robert flipped through old financial reports, contracts, and emails. Each document told a story of relentless ambition, of victories won at the cost of others' suffering. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered, recalling the image of Thomas Collins leaving his office building for the last time. It was then that Robert made a decision. Picking up the phone, he called his assistant. "Cancel all my appointments for the next few weeks," he ordered, "and get in touch with our legal team. We have a lot of work to do." Over the following weeks, Blackwood Tech underwent a transformation. Robert, though drastically reducing his working hours, initiated a thorough audit of the company's acquisitions and business practices over the past 20 years. Every questionable deal, every aggressive tactic was scrutinized and reassessed. More than that, Robert began devising plans to compensate those harmed by his past actions. Compensation funds were set up, job offers extended to former employees of acquired companies, and in some cases, Robert even returned control of subsidiaries to their original owners. "I can't undo the past," he said in a press conference, exhaustion clear on his face. "But I can work for a better future, for my family, for my company, and for all those impacted by my actions." Meanwhile, Jack Harris wrestled with his own inner demons. The investigation, the trial, the revelations, they'd left him emotionally drained. But it was his conflicting feelings about Jennifer that kept him awake at night. He found himself replaying memories of their college days, recalling the vibrant, idealistic young woman he'd loved. How had that Jennifer turned into the cold, vengeful woman at Blackwood Mansion? And more troublingly, was there still a trace of that original Jennifer beneath the hardened exterior? "She made terrible choices," Jack told himself, gazing out his apartment window at the sleeping city, "but I can't help wondering, what if it had been me? What if my family had been destroyed? How far would I go for justice or revenge?" These questions plagued him, a reminder of how thin the line could be between justice and vengeance, between righteousness and obsession. For Emily and Sarah, the ramifications of Jennifer's and Robert's actions were far more immediate. They were placed under the care of specialized child therapists, attending daily sessions to process recent events. At first, therapy was tough. The girls alternated between silent defiance and bursts of anger and confusion. "Why didn't Jenny love us?" Sarah asked one day, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Did we do something wrong?" Emily, the more reserved of the two, spent days drawing dark images of houses with locked doors and lonely figures. Slowly, with patience and care, the therapists helped the girls understand that none of this was their fault. That Jennifer's behavior stemmed from her own pain and anger, not something they had done. "Sometimes," one of the therapists explained gently, "grown-ups make bad choices because they're hurting inside. That doesn't make it right, but it helps us understand." Over the weeks, small signs of progress began to appear. The girls smiled more often, laughed more freely. Though the trauma couldn't be erased, they were gradually learning to cope. The question of custody became a central issue in court. Robert, committed to making amends, fought fiercely for the right to raise his daughters. But years of unintentional neglect weighed against him. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said during a hearing, "while we acknowledge your recent efforts to redeem yourself, we cannot ignore the fact that your prolonged absence contributed to the environment that allowed this abuse to occur." In the end, Robert was granted custody of the girls, but under strict supervision. He was ordered to attend parenting classes, continue family therapy with the girls, and undergo regular evaluations by social workers. "I'll do whatever it takes," Robert said, tears in his eyes, hugging Emily and Sarah after the ruling. "You two are the most important things in my life now. I promise I'll never neglect you again." As the Blackwood case unfolded, it seized the nation's attention. Talk shows, opinion columns, and social media lit up with debates about the issues raised by the trial. Some argued that Jennifer was a victim as much as a villain, her thirst for revenge fueled by a genuine injustice. Others condemned her outright, insisting that nothing excused abusing innocent children. Robert's role was also hotly debated. Some saw him as an example of redemption, praising his efforts to correct past mistakes. Others maintained that his current actions couldn't erase the damage he'd caused over the years. The Blackwood case is a powerful reminder of the far-reaching consequences of our actions, wrote a respected columnist. It forces us to question the true cost of corporate success and the destructive power of revenge. Child welfare advocacy groups used the case to call for tighter oversight of wealthy and influential families. Money and power cannot shield one from charges of neglect or abuse, one spokesperson argued. The case also sparked discussions about corporate accountability. Several large companies, perhaps fearing similar scrutiny, announced reviews of their merger practices and compensation programs for employees affected by past acquisitions. In the midst of it all, Jack Harris continued his work, more aware than ever of the impact his choices could have. Every case he investigated, every decision he made, was now filtered through the lessons he'd learned from the Blackwood saga. We never truly know the full repercussions of our actions, he reflected one day, watching the streets of Oakwood Hills through his patrol car window. But that doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to try to do the right thing, even when it's hard. As the media frenzy around the case began to subside, a sense of change lingered in the air. For Robert, it marked the start of a journey toward redemption and reconnection with his daughters. For Jennifer, it was a time of reflection and perhaps eventual regret behind bars. For Emily and Sarah, it was the beginning of a long healing process. And for Jack, it was a constant reminder of the complexity of human nature, the fragility of relationships, and the lasting power of decisions made long ago. The Blackwood case had ended, but its reverberations would be felt for a long time to come. It was a story of pain, revenge, and redemption that had touched many lives and, perhaps, changed some forever. 6 months had passed since the tumultuous trial that had shaken the Blackwoods and all of Oakwood Hills. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and power, now exuded a different atmosphere, warmer, more alive. Robert Blackwood, once known for his commanding presence in corporate boardrooms, could now be regularly spotted at the gates of the local elementary school, eagerly waiting for Emily and Sarah. His immaculate suits had given way to more casual attire, and the intense gaze of a business magnate had softened into the gentle smile of a devoted father. "How was school today, girls?" asked Robert, kneeling down to hug his daughters. Emily, always the chattier one, started animatedly talking about her science project, while Sarah shyly showed him a drawing she had made. Robert listened attentively, asking questions and praising their efforts. This everyday scene was a testimony to the profound shift in his priorities. Back at the mansion, the afternoon routine played out in a completely different way than it had 6 months ago. Robert sat at the kitchen table, helping the girls with their homework. His phone, once an extension of his hand, lay silent in a corner. "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" Sarah asked, frowning at her notebook. Robert smiled, pulling his chair closer. "Of course, my sweetheart. Let's figure it out together." Friday nights, once reserved for business dinners and social events, were now dedicated to planning weekend adventures. A map lay spread out on the living room table, with Emily and Sarah poring over it, eyes gleaming with excitement. "How about a camping trip at this lake?" Robert suggested, pointing to a spot on the map. "We can fish, make campfires, and tell scary stories." The girls enthusiastically agreed, already imagining the fun they'd have. These trips had become a sacred ritual for the family, an opportunity to create new memories and strengthen the bonds that had once been so fragile. Evenings at Blackwood Mansion now included a new tradition. Robert, sitting on the edge of his daughters' beds, a storybook in his hands, softly filled their bedroom with tales of magic and adventure. "And they all lived happily ever after," Robert concluded, closing the book. He leaned down to kiss each daughter on the forehead. "Good night, my princesses." "Good night, Dad," Emily and Sarah replied in unison, their eyes already heavy with sleep. Robert lingered for a moment, watching them drift off, overwhelmed by the love he felt. How did I almost lose this? He thought, a lump forming in his throat. Twice a week, the Blackwood family could be seen walking into Dr. Martinez's office for family therapy. These sessions, initially challenging and emotionally draining, became a pillar in their journey toward healing. Robert, Dr. Martinez said during a recent session, I've noticed a significant improvement in your ability to express emotions and connect with the girls. How does that feel? Robert glanced at Emily and Sarah, who were quietly drawing in a corner of the room. It's liberating, he admitted. I never imagined being vulnerable could make me feel so strong. At Blackwood Tech, the change was equally palpable. Robert, though cutting back his work hours dramatically, implemented a series of radical reforms. The company adopted a new code of ethics, prioritizing sustainable and socially responsible business practices. It's not just about profit, Robert declared in a shareholders' meeting. It's about building a legacy we can be proud of, one that benefits not just us but the whole community. One of Robert's most notable initiatives was establishing the Blackwood Foundation for Corporate Justice. Generously funded with his own resources, the foundation aimed to help families harmed by unethical corporate practices, offering legal, financial, and emotional support. It's our responsibility to correct past mistakes and create a more just future, Robert explained at the foundation's launch. At home, the signs of Emily's and Sarah's emotional recovery grew more evident by the day. Their smiles came easier, their laughter more unrestrained. The treehouse, once a symbol of isolation, now resonated with the sounds of play and giggles. Jack Harris, the police officer whose investigation had sparked this transformation, had become a frequent and welcome presence in the Blackwoods' lives. He often visited the mansion, joining the family for Sunday barbecues or casual soccer matches in the yard. You know, Jack, Robert said one afternoon, watching the girls play, I never imagined I'd say this, but I'm grateful for everything that happened. It was painful, but necessary. Jack nodded, understanding. Sometimes we have to face our shadows to find the light. As summer approached, excitement filled the air at Blackwood Mansion. Robert and the girls gathered in the living room, maps and travel brochures scattered around them. So, what do you think? Robert asked, eyes shining with enthusiasm. 2 weeks exploring the Grand Canyon? Yes! Emily and Sarah shouted in unison, jumping up and down with excitement. Robert laughed, pulling them into a tight hug. Then it settled. It's going to be the best trip ever. The next morning, Robert was out in the garden with Emily and Sarah, helping them water the flowers they'd planted together months ago. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the scene, as if nature itself was smiling on this reborn family. Jack Key, who had stopped by for a quick visit, watched from a distance. He couldn't help smiling at the contrast between the Robert Blackwood he'd met 6 months earlier and the man he saw now, relaxed, smiling, fully present with his daughters. Robert looked up and spotted Jack. With a smile, he motioned for his friend to join them. As Jack approached, Robert pulled his daughters closer. Thank you, he said softly to Jack, emotion in his voice. For everything. Jack nodded, a wave of satisfaction washing over him as he saw how far they had come. You did all the hard work, he replied. I just pointed the way. As the sun climbed higher, promising a new day full of possibilities, the scene in the Blackwood garden was one of hope and renewal. Robert, Emily, and Sarah together in a warm embrace, with Jack right beside them, a reassembled family, stronger and ready to face the future together. And so, amid the scent of freshly watered flowers and the distant chirping of birds, a new chapter began for the Blackwoods, a story not of wealth or power, but of love, forgiveness, and second chances, a story that, despite every obstacle, promised a happy ending.